Station Vera was alive with the sounds of 1,000 different worlds. The massive trading hub stretched across 3 city-sized platforms, each one packed with alien merchants selling everything from exotic spices to advanced weaponry. The air itself was a cocktail of strange scents, some sweet, some metallic, others so foreign that human noses couldn't quite process them. Holographic advertisements flickered in languages Jake Martinez couldn't read, while overhead, the wealthy elite drifted past on their expensive hover platforms, completely detached from the chaos below. Jake had been through this marketplace 100 times before. As a freight hauler, he made regular runs to the outer colonies, delivering supplies to mining operations and research stations that most people forgot existed. It was honest work, if lonely. He'd learned to navigate the crowds of aliens, learned which species to avoid eye contact with and which ones appreciated a friendly nod. He'd become just another face in the endless stream of travelers passing through. But today was different. The sound hit him while he was 3 corridors away from the main marketplace, carrying a cargo scanner in one hand and a lukewarm cup of what passed for coffee in the other. At first, he thought it was some kind of alarm, a high-pitched, keening wail that seemed to cut through every other noise. But there was something about it that made his skin prickle. Something desperate. Something alive. Jake stopped walking. Around him, aliens continued their business without pause. A group of tall, insect-like Vraxians clicked past, their 6 legs moving in perfect synchronization. A security patrol of heavily armored Keltoids marched by, their weapons gleaming under the station's artificial lights. Nobody else seemed to notice the sound, or if they did, they were ignoring it. He set down his scanner and followed the crying. The marketplace was even more crowded than usual. Some kind of trade summit was happening, which meant the station was packed with merchants and diplomats from across the galaxy. Jake pushed through the crowd, muttering apologies that most species probably couldn't understand. The crying grew louder, more desperate. It was the kind of sound that reached inside your chest and squeezed. Then he saw it. Against one of the massive support columns that held up the marketplace's second level, a tiny creature lay curled in on itself. At first, Jake thought it might be some kind of exotic pet that had escaped its owner. But as he got closer, he realized what he was looking at. A dragon. An actual, honest-to-God dragon no bigger than a house cat. The hatchling's scales, which should have shimmered like polished gemstones, were dull and covered in dust. One wing was bent at an angle that made Jake wince just looking at it. The little creature's sides heaved with each breath, and those enormous golden eyes tracked the passing crowds with a hope that was fading fast. It cried out again, and Jake understood that sound now. It wasn't just noise. It was language stripped down to its most basic form. Help me. Please. Someone. Anyone. A massive Vraxian merchant stepped directly over the hatchling, its multiple legs easily clearing the small obstacle. The dragon flinched but didn't move. Couldn't move. A pair of Kelthoid security officers walked past next, their helmets swiveling to register the creature before deliberately looking away. Then came the wealthy ones, the Morphids with their translucent, flowing bodies that shifted colors with their moods. They activated their hover discs and glided smoothly over the dragon without breaking their conversation. Jake stood there watching, waiting for someone to do something. But the crowd just kept flowing around the dying hatchling like water around a stone. He'd heard about the station's protocols, sure. Every species handled their own problems. Getting involved in another species' business could lead to legal complications, diplomatic incidents, or worse. And dragons? He'd heard they were rare, valuable, protected by a dozen different galactic treaties. Touching one without authorization could land you in a station prison for years. But Jake wasn't thinking about protocols or treaties as he knelt down beside the hatchling. The dragon's head lifted slightly, those golden eyes locking onto his face. Jake had never seen anything look so alone, so abandoned. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition maybe, a shared understanding of what it meant to need help and have the whole world walk past you. "Hey there, little one," Jake said softly, extending his rough, calloused hand. "I've got you, buddy." The hatchling made a small sound, barely more than a whimper. Its body was warm to the touch, almost feverish. Jake could feel the rapid flutter of its heartbeat against his palm as he gently scooped the creature into his arms. It weighed almost nothing. Around him, the marketplace seemed to freeze. Aliens stopped their haggling to stare. A Kelthoid officer raised his communication device to his helmet. A group of Morphids changed color to a shocked purple. Jake could feel dozens of eyes on him, some confused, some disgusted, some calculating. The human was breaking protocol. The human was interfering. The human was inviting serious trouble. Jake tucked the hatchling carefully inside his worn leather jacket, feeling it nestle against his chest like it belonged there. The dragon's breathing slowed slightly, just a bit calmer now that it wasn't alone anymore. "Let's get you somewhere safe," Jake murmured, turning toward the docking bays where his ship waited. He didn't see the Kelthoid officer speaking urgently into his communicator. He didn't see the message being relayed to the station's darker corners, where people made their living trading in rare and valuable things. He didn't know that somewhere in those shadows, a collector named Vex was receiving very interesting news about a lost dragon hatchling. All Jake knew was that something small and helpless had needed help, and he'd been the only one to stop. As he walked through the parting crowds heading for his ship, he figured that was enough. Jake's cargo ship wasn't much to look at. The Phoenix had seen better days, about 20 years worth of better days to be exact. The hull was patched in a dozen places, the life support system made concerning rattling noises every few hours, and the navigation computer needed a solid thump to boot up properly. But it was home. It was his. He carried the hatchling through the narrow corridors, past stacks of cargo containers and maintenance equipment, into his small living quarters at the back of the ship. The space was cramped, just a bunk, a tiny kitchenette, and a fold-down table that doubled as his desk. But it was private and warm, and right now that was what mattered. Jake laid the little dragon gently on his bunk, which was really just a thin mattress with a worn blanket that had seen more star systems than most tourists. Under the ship's bright interior lights, the hatchling looked even worse than he'd thought. The scales that should have gleamed like polished gold were scratched and dull. The broken wing hung at a sickening angle, and when Jake carefully touched the dragon's side, he could feel every rib under the skin. "Okay, buddy," Jake said, pulling out his emergency medical kit from under the bunk. "I'm not exactly a doctor, and I've definitely never worked on a dragon before, but let's see what we can do here." The kit was designed for humans, naturally, but Jake had learned over the years that most species had similar enough biology when it came to the basics. Broken bones needed to be set. Wounds needed to be cleaned. Dehydration needed fluids. He pulled out antiseptic wipes, bandages, and the compact splinting materials meant for broken fingers or arms. The hatchling watched him with those enormous golden eyes, too exhausted to be afraid anymore. Jake talked as he worked, keeping his voice low and steady. "This might hurt a little, but I need to straighten out this wing before I wrap it. I'm going to be as gentle as I can, okay?" He carefully extended the broken wing, feeling the dragon tense under his hands. The bone had snapped clean but hadn't pierced the delicate membrane. That was good luck, at least. Jake worked slowly, using the splinting material to create a framework that would hold the wing in place while it healed. His hands were big and calloused from years of manual labor, but he'd always been good with delicate work. You didn't survive as a freight hauler without learning how to repair sensitive electronics and machinery. As he wrapped the wing with soft bandaging material, something strange started happening. At first, Jake thought he was just tired. It had been a long day and the adrenaline from rescuing the dragon was wearing off. But then the images came, clear and vivid, like memories that weren't his own. He saw a ship. Not his ship, but something larger, more elegant. Organic curves instead of human angles. The corridors were wide and lit with bioluminescent panels. And there were dragons, dozens of them, ranging from hatchlings to massive adults whose wings nearly brushed the ceiling. It was beautiful. Peaceful. Then the peace shattered. Jake saw flashes of chaos, alarms blaring, adults shouting in a language he didn't understand but somehow felt. The ship shuddered from weapons fire. Smoke filled the corridors. Pirates, heavily armed, stormed through the passages. The dragons scattered, adults grabbing hatchlings and fleeing toward escape pods. But in the panic and confusion, this little one had been separated. It had crawled into a storage compartment, too small and scared to cry out. By the time it emerged, the ship was empty except for the pirates looting everything valuable. They hadn't seen the tiny hatchling slip away into the station's crowded docking bay. The vision faded, and Jake found himself back in his ship, breathing hard. The hatchling was staring at him, and somehow Jake knew the creature had shown him those memories deliberately. This wasn't just an animal. This was someone intelligent, someone who'd been through hell and survived. "You've been alone for a while, haven't you?" Jake said softly, his throat tight. "Days, maybe longer. Scared out of your mind, hurt, and everyone just walking past like you didn't exist." The hatchling made a small sound, somewhere between a chirp and a whimper. Jake finished wrapping the wing and sat back on his heels. "Well, you're not alone anymore. I'm Jake Martinez. And you need a name too. Can't just keep calling you little one, or buddy. How about Ember? You've got that golden color like coals in a fire. Ember work for you?" The dragon, Ember, chirped more brightly this time and nuzzled against Jake's hand. The touch sent a warm feeling through him, like the creature was saying thank you in a way that went beyond words. Jake was just reaching for a water dispenser to help Ember drink when a sharp, metallic knock echoed through the ship's hull. It was the kind of knock that meant trouble. Official trouble. He made his way to the airlock, his stomach sinking. Through the small viewport he could see two figures waiting outside. One was a Kelthoid officer, all armor and weapons and intimidating bulk. The other was something Jake had only seen a few times. An Arachnix, one of the spider-like species that handled most of the station's administrative work. Its 8 legs tapped impatiently against the docking platform. Jake opened the airlock but didn't step out. "Can I help you?" The Arachnix's mandibles clicked together, translating into standard galactic speech through its communication device. "Human Martinez. Our sensors indicate you brought an undocumented Class 7 sentient organism aboard this vessel. You are harboring a dragon hatchling without proper registration, documentation, or authorization. This carries severe legal penalties under Stations Accords Articles 47 through 52. The little guy was dying in your marketplace," Jake said, keeping his voice level. Nobody was helping. Station protocol clearly states. I know what your protocol states. And I saw exactly how well that was working out for him. The Kelthoid officer stepped forward, his helmet display flickering with threat assessment data. Surrender the creature immediately, and we may reduce the charges against you. Jake felt Ember's presence behind him, felt the hatchling's fear through that strange connection they now shared. He thought about those memories, the attack, the abandonment, the days of crying for help while thousands walked past. "No," Jake said simply. The Arachnix's legs clicked in agitation. "You don't understand the complications you're creating. Dragons are protected under multiple treaties. They're valuable. There are collectors, traders, political interests." "I understand just fine," Jake interrupted. "This little one needed help and nobody was giving it. So I did. That's all there is to it." The officer's hand moved toward his weapon. "Then you will face charges. You will be detained, and the creature will be surrendered to proper authorities." Jake looked at the officer, then at the Arachnix administrator, and made a decision that he knew would change everything. He stepped back into his ship. "Sorry, but I don't think so." He slammed his hand on the airlock control and the door hissed shut. The Kelthoid officer was already shouting, and Jake could hear more security being called. He ran to the cockpit, his fingers flying over the controls as the Phoenix roared to life. The docking clamps released with a series of metallic clanks. "Hold on, Ember," Jake called out as the ship lifted off. Behind him, station security was scrambling, and somewhere in the darker corners of Vera, a collector named Vex was smiling at the news of a dragon on the run. Jake Martinez had just become a fugitive. But as he felt Ember's grateful presence in his mind, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The Phoenix cleared Station Vera's outer docking ring, and for about 30 seconds, Jake thought they might actually make it. He plotted a jump course to a neutral colony 3 systems over, somewhere he could figure out his next move. The engines were humming, the navigation computer was actually cooperating for once, and Ember had settled into the co-pilot's seat, those golden eyes watching everything with curious intelligence. Then every alarm on the ship started screaming at once. Jake's scanner lit up like a Christmas tree. 4 ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly behind him. They weren't station security vessels. These were sleeker, meaner, built for one purpose only: hunting. "Damn it," Jake growled, his hands already moving across the controls. He pushed the throttle forward, coaxing every bit of speed his old freighter could manage. The Phoenix wasn't built for running. She was a workhorse designed to haul cargo across long distances, not outrun military-grade pursuit craft. The comm system crackled to life, and a voice oozed through the speakers like oil. It was smooth, cultured, and absolutely cold. "Human Martinez. This is Collector Vex. You possess something that belongs to me. Return the dragon hatchling immediately and I'll let you live. You have my word." Jake's hands tightened on the controls. He'd heard stories about Vex over the years, whispered warnings in station bars, cautionary tales among freight haulers. The crime lord specialized in rare and exotic species, buying and selling sentient beings like they were pieces of art. Entire colonies had disappeared because of him. Security forces across 3 sectors wanted him, but Vex was too smart, too well-connected, and too dangerous to catch. And now Jake had something Vex wanted. Through their connection, Jake felt Ember's reaction to that voice, pure terror mixed with recognition. The hatchling had heard that voice before, probably giving orders during the attack on the dragon colony. Vex hadn't just stumbled onto information about a lost hatchling. He'd orchestrated the whole thing. Jake grabbed the comm microphone, his jaw set. "Nothing on this ship belongs to you, Vex." A laugh echoed through the speakers, devoid of any real humor. "Everything has a price, human. Including your life. I'm giving you 10 seconds to reconsider." "Here's my reconsideration," Jake said and cut the comm. The hunter ships opened fire. Red energy bolts streaked past the Phoenix's hull, close enough that Jake could see the flash through the viewport. The ship's aging shields flared as they absorbed impacts, but Jake knew they wouldn't last long. He yanked the controls hard to starboard, then dove underneath one of the attacking ships. The Phoenix wasn't fast, but she was smaller than those hunters, and Jake had been flying through tight spots for 20 years. More weapons fire tore through the space where he'd been a second earlier. The shields dropped to 60%. Then 40. Jake's eyes scanned the navigation display desperately. Station Vera sat near the edge of a massive nebula, a churning cloud of gas and dust that played hell with sensors and navigation systems. Most ships avoided it. The official route around it added 3 hours to any journey, but it was safe. The route through it, the Nebula Run, was borderline suicidal. Ion storms raged constantly inside, radiation levels spiked without warning, and the dense clouds could hide asteroids until you were right on top of them. Jake had heard stories of ships going in and never coming out. Aim straight for it. "Hold on, Ember," he shouted as the Phoenix plunged into the swirling purple clouds. Immediately the ship started shaking. The sensors went haywire, showing ghost contacts in every direction. Jake was flying half-blind now, relying on instruments that were barely functioning and instincts honed over decades. Behind him, the hunter ships followed without hesitation. Vex pilots were good, probably ex-military, definitely experienced. A weapons blast struck the Phoenix's port shield, and the entire ship lurched sideways. Sparks exploded from a control panel near Jake's head. The shield indicator dropped to 15%, then 10. Another hit like that and they'd be exposed. Jake threw the ship into a spiral, weaving between columns of charged particles that lit up the nebula like lightning. The Phoenix groaned in protest, her old frame never designed for this kind of stress. A proximity alarm blared as an asteroid materialized out of the clouds, massive and moving fast. Jake pulled up so hard his stomach dropped, missing the rock by meters. One of the hunter ships wasn't so lucky. It clipped the asteroid and spiraled out of control, disappearing into the nebula's depths. 3 left. Ember clung to Jake's shoulder, making frightened chirping sounds. Through their bond, Jake felt the hatchling's fear but also something else, trust. Ember believed in him. That thought steadied Jake's hands even as another weapons blast rocked the ship. The cargo bay took a direct hit. Alarms screamed as the rear section depressurized. Jake sealed the emergency bulkheads, cutting off that entire section of the ship. They were shedding components now, leaving a trail of debris through the nebula. "Come on, baby, hold together," Jake pleaded with his ship, patting the console like it could hear him. "Just a little longer." But the hunters were relentless. They'd adapted to the nebula, using coordinated fire patterns to box him in. Jake juked left, then right, but there was nowhere to go. He was running out of room, running out of options. Then the main engine took a hit. The shot was lucky, or unlucky depending on your perspective. It punched through the failing shields and struck the primary drive assembly. The Phoenix lurched violently, and the entire cockpit exploded in a shower of sparks. Fire suppression systems activated automatically, filling the air with chemical foam. Jake's hands flew across the controls, trying to restart the engine, trying to do anything. But the damage was catastrophic. The Phoenix was dying and they were deep in the nebula with no way out. Through the clearing smoke, Jake spotted something on the sensors. A moon, small and barren just at the edge of the nebula. It wasn't much, but it was solid ground. Maybe he could land, make repairs by some time. He grabbed the comm, broadcasting on every emergency frequency. "Mayday, mayday. This is cargo vessel Phoenix. We've taken critical damage. I'm going down." Jake aimed for the moon, killing what was left of his forward momentum. The Phoenix dropped like a stone, punching through the thin atmosphere. The heat shields held, barely. The landing gear deployed, but one of the hydraulics had failed. They were coming in too fast at the wrong angle with no way to slow down. The ship hit the rocky surface and bounced. Jake's head cracked against something hard, and stars exploded across his vision. The Phoenix skidded across the barren terrain, tearing up chunks of rock and leaving a long scar in the dust. They were tumbling now, end over end, the world spinning in sickening circles. Then they hit the canyon wall. The impact threw Jake against his restraints so hard he thought his ribs would crack. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Systems failed one after another, the cockpit going dark except for a few emergency lights. Then silence. Jake hung in his chair, head ringing, tasting blood. Beside him, Ember chirped weakly. They were alive. Somehow, impossibly, they were alive. But overhead, through the cracked viewport, Jake could see 3 hunter ships landing nearby. Vex was coming to collect his prize. Jake's first thought when he regained consciousness was that everything hurt. His second thought was that he needed to move right now because those hunter ships were landing and he had maybe 2 minutes before Vex people came for Ember. He fumbled with his safety harness, fingers clumsy and not quite cooperating. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, making it hard to see. His left arm throbbed, not broken he thought but badly bruised. His ribs screamed with every breath. The cockpit was a disaster zone of shattered glass, twisted metal, and dying electrical systems that sparked and popped. Ember, Jake croaked, looking around frantically. The hatchling chirped from somewhere behind the co-pilot's seat, crawling out from where the crash had thrown him. The splint on Ember's wing was still intact. Small miracle, but the little dragon looked shaken and scared. Jake scooped Ember up with his good arm, holding the hatchling close to his chest. We gotta move, buddy. Those guys out there aren't here to help. He kicked open what was left of the cockpit door and half crawled, half fell out of the wreckage. The moon's gravity was lighter than Earth's standard, which was the only reason Jake could move at all. His legs felt like rubber and the world kept tilting at weird angles. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, nothing but gray rock, deep canyons and dust. No atmosphere worth mentioning, which meant the thin emergency barrier the Phoenix had generated around the crash site was the only thing keeping them alive. Beyond that invisible dome, the vacuum of space would kill them in seconds. 3 hunter ships were settling onto the rocky surface about 100 meters away, their landing jets kicking up clouds of dust. Jake's mind raced. He couldn't run. Where would he go? The Phoenix's communication array was destroyed in the crash. Even if he could call for help, nobody would arrive in time. He spotted a crevice in the canyon wall, a narrow gap between 2 large boulders. It wasn't much, but it would give Ember some cover. Stay behind me, Jake whispered, setting the hatchling down in the protective space. No matter what happens, you stay hidden. Understand? Ember's golden eyes locked onto his, and Jake felt the hatchling's protest through their connection. Ember didn't want to hide. Didn't want Jake to face danger alone. Please, Jake said, and something in his voice must have convinced the little dragon, because Ember settled into the crevice, though every line of his small body radiated reluctance. Jake turned back toward the hunter ships just as their ramps lowered. 6 figures emerged and his heart sank. These weren't station security or even regular mercenaries. These were professionals, the kind of people Vex paid serious money to acquire rare prizes. 2 Kelthoids led the group, their massive armored bodies moving with surprising grace in the low gravity. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, covered in military-grade combat armor that probably cost more than Jake's entire ship. Behind them came a Vraxian, its 6 legs allowing it to navigate the rough terrain easily, mandibles clicking with anticipation. 3 Morphids brought up the rear, their translucent bodies shifting colors as they moved, chameleon-like beings that could blend into almost any environment. They fanned out as they approached, weapons drawn, professional and coordinated. Jake recognized military training when he saw it. These weren't just thugs. They were soldiers. The lead Kelthoid stopped about 20 feet away, his helmet's targeting system fixed on Jake. When he spoke, his voice came through an external speaker, deep and emotionless. The dragon. Now, make this easy on yourself, human. Jake looked around desperately for anything he could use. The Phoenix's cargo bay had contained emergency supplies, tools, equipment, but all of that was buried in the wreckage or scattered across the crash site. All he had was the plasma torch clipped to his belt, a tool designed for cutting through metal panels and fixing machinery. Against 6 armed professionals, it was basically useless. He pulled it out anyway, igniting the bright blue flame. His hand was shaking and he knew they could see it. Over my dead body, Jake said, and was surprised that his voice came out steady. The Vraxian laughed, a chittering sound that echoed off the canyon walls. Humans? Always so emotional over things that don't concern them. This creature is valuable property. You're throwing your life away for nothing. He's not property, Jake shot back. He's someone. And he needed help. Touching, the Kelthoid said flatly. Last chance. Jake set his feet, raising the plasma torch. Come and take him. They advanced. Jake had been in fights before, Bar brawls on rough stations, disputes with pirates over cargo, the occasional disagreement with port authorities that got physical. But this was different. These were trained killers and he was an injured freight hauler with a cutting torch. The Vraxian came at him first, moving fast on those 6 legs. Jake swung the torch in a wide arc and the alien backed off, not willing to risk getting burned. But that put Jake's back to the Morphids, and he realized too late it was a coordinated attack. One of the Morphids hit him from behind, its body solidifying just long enough to deliver a crushing blow to Jake's shoulder. He stumbled forward, right into the path of a Kelthoid's armored fist. The impact lifted Jake off his feet and sent him crashing into a boulder. His ribs, already bruised, exploded in agony. The plasma torch flew from his hand, skittering across the rocks. He tried to stand, tried to do anything, but his body wouldn't respond. Everything was pain and spinning stars and the taste of blood. Through blurring vision, Jake saw the lead Kelthoid step past him, weapon raised, aiming directly at the crevice where Ember was hiding. "No!" Jake screamed or tried to. It came out as more of a gasp. "No, please." The Kelthoid's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the world exploded in fire. Ember erupted from the crevice like a golden comet. The hatchling's small body glowed with intense heat, scales blazing with light. The dragon's mouth opened and a stream of flame shot out, not the weak sputter of a baby's first fire, but a concentrated jet of burning rage and desperate protection. The flame caught the lead Kelthoid square in the chest, superheating his armor and sending him stumbling backward with a roar of pain. The other hunters scattered, weapons forgotten as they tried to avoid the fire. Ember landed between Jake and the hunters, spreading his wings, one still splinted, but both extended in a display of defiance. The hatchling was tiny compared to the armored warriors, but in that moment, Ember looked absolutely fierce. Fire dripped from his jaws like liquid gold, and those eyes burned with protective fury. The little dragon stood over Jake, hissing and spitting flames at anyone who moved closer. "Good dragon," Jake managed to cough out, struggling to prop himself up on one elbow. Pride swelled in his chest despite the pain. "That's my boy." The hunters regrouped, but they were more cautious now. The Kelthoid's armor was scorched black, still smoking. They hadn't expected the hatchling to be able to breathe fire yet. Most dragons didn't develop that ability for weeks or months after hatching. But Ember had found his fire early, driven by the need to protect the one person in the galaxy who'd stopped to help him. The lead Kelthoid raised his weapon again, but the Vraxian put a claw on his arm. "Vex wants it alive and undamaged. We need to rethink this." They retreated to their ships and Jake knew this wasn't over. They'd come back with different tactics, better preparation. Vex wouldn't give up, not when he was this close. But for now Jake and Ember had survived. And somewhere in the back of his pain-fogged mind, Jake was already trying to figure out how to call for help with a dead communication system and 6 professional killers waiting for another chance to attack. Jake spent the next 6 hours working in a haze of pain and determination. The Phoenix's communication array was a tangled mess of melted wires and fried circuits, but Jake had been fixing broken equipment his entire adult life. His hands shook from exhaustion and blood loss, but he kept working. Ember stayed close, pressing against his leg, offering warmth and silent encouragement through their bond. When the repairs were finally done, held together with spare wire, electrical tape, and desperate hope, Jake powered up the system and prayed it would work. The speakers crackled to life and he nearly cried with relief. He set the broadcast to transmit on every frequency he could access, including the emergency channels reserved for distress calls. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but the words were clear. "This is Jake Martinez, human freighter captain. I've got a dragon hatchling named Ember who was separated from his colony during a pirate attack. A crime lord called Vex is hunting us. He wants to add Ember to his collection. The dragon colony is 3 sectors away, but we're stranded on a moon with no working engines and killers waiting outside. If anyone can hear this message, we need help. These are our coordinates." He rattled off the position, then added one more thing. "Ember's just a kid. He didn't deserve what happened to him. Nobody did. If you're out there, if you're listening, please." Jake slumped against the damaged hull of his ship, pulling Ember into his lap. The hatchling curled up against his chest, exhausted. Through the cracked viewport, Jake could see Vex hunter ships in the distance, waiting like vultures. They tried 2 more attacks, but each time Ember had driven them back with bursts of flame. The little dragon was getting stronger, braver, but Jake knew they couldn't hold out forever. "I'm sorry, buddy," Jake whispered, stroking Ember's scales. "I tried." 12 hours crawled by. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness, his body finally giving in to the injuries. He dreamed of Earth, of places he'd never see again. He dreamed of his mother's kitchen, the smell of home-cooked meals, the sound of rain on a real roof instead of ship's metal. Then the scanner beeped. Jake jerked awake, his heart pounding. One ship had appeared on the edge of the system. Then another. Then 5 more. The scanner couldn't keep up with the new contacts appearing, 10, 15, 20 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Freighters like his own Phoenix, battered and well-used. Explorer vessels with sensor arrays instead of weapons. Mining ships with industrial equipment still attached. And a handful of military escorts, their clean lines and weapon systems unmistakable. Every single one was human. The comm system crackled and a voice came through, female, weathered by years in space but warm. Jake Martinez, this is Captain Beth Walker of the freighter Dakota Wind. We got your message. Took us a while to get here but we made it. Humans don't leave each other behind and we sure as hell don't let bullies win. Jake's throat closed up. He couldn't speak for a moment, couldn't process what was happening. Strangers. Complete strangers had heard his call and traveled across star systems to help. I didn't think anyone would come, he finally managed, his voice breaking. Beth's laugh was kind. You called for help. You're human, we're human. Of course we came. That's what we do. The human ships moved into formation, surrounding Jake's position. They weren't warships. Most of them were civilian vessels just like the Phoenix. But together they formed a wall between Jake and Vex hunters. Jake watched through the viewport as more ships kept arriving. 30, 40. Word must have spread through the human networks, ship to ship, station to station. Every human in range had heard about a guy named Jake who'd risked everything for a dragon hatchling, and they'd decided that was worth showing up for. Then Vex's real fleet arrived. 12 warships dropped into the system, sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons. They were professional military craft, probably stolen or bought from some corrupt government. Each one could take on 5 civilian ships without breaking a sweat. But there weren't 5 civilian ships. There were 47 and more were still arriving. Beth's voice came through again, harder now. Stand down, Vex. That dragon isn't yours. These humans aren't yours. Leave now or we'll make you leave. Vex's response dripped with contempt. Foolish humans. You would risk war over one insignificant creature? Your ships are no match for my fleet. I'll destroy every one of you if necessary. Another voice joined the channel, male, calm, with the clipped precision of military training. This is Captain Tom Bradley of the human defense vessel Resolute. I'm looking at 47 civilian ships who traveled across 3 sectors because one guy asked for help. You really think we're going to back down now? We'd risk a lot more than war. See, we have this thing called compassion. You might want to look it up before you do something really stupid. The silence stretched out. Jake held his breath, holding Ember close. Vex's fleet held position for another minute. Then, slowly they began to retreat. The crime lord had calculated the odds and realized that humans, crazy, irrational humans, weren't bluffing. They would fight. They would die if necessary. And Vex, for all his cruelty, wasn't willing to face that kind of determination over one dragon hatchling. This isn't over, Vex transmitted before his ships jumped away. Yeah, it is, Beth said quietly. You just don't know it yet. 2 days later, the dragon colony arrived. They came in a ship that looked like it had been grown rather than built, organic curves flowing through space with impossible grace. The elder dragons were massive and magnificent, their scales gleaming like precious metals, their presence radiating ancient wisdom. Jake stood before them, battered and bandaged, with Ember on his shoulder. He explained everything, the rescue, the chase, the crash, the humans who'd answered his call. The dragons listened in silence. When he finished, the colony leader, a silver dragon whose scales seemed to capture starlight, lowered her enormous head until her eyes were level with Jake's. Human Jake Martinez, she said, her voice like music and thunder combined. In 10,000 years, we have watched countless species rise and fall. We have seen empires built on honor and destroyed by greed. But never have we witnessed what you have shown us. You risked everything for one lost child. You called for help and your people came. Not for profit. Not for power. Simply because it was right. The silver dragon's gaze swept across the assembled human ships. We name you Bondkeeper. Ember is yours to raise as family, if you will accept this honor. Jake looked at Ember, who chirped happily and nuzzled his cheek. He thought about the last few days, the fear, the pain, the desperate fight for survival. Then he thought about 47 ships full of humans who dropped everything to help a stranger. Family, Jake said, smiling through tears. Yeah, I like that. Word of what happened spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species heard about the humans who'd faced down a crime lord's fleet to protect one small dragon. They whispered about it in trade stations and diplomatic meetings. Some called it inefficient. Others called it illogical. But everyone agreed on one thing: it was the most human thing anyone had ever seen. And in space stations and colonies across dozens of systems, when someone was in trouble, they started hoping a human might hear their call for help. Because humans, strange as they were, actually came when you called.